In March 2025, British Columbia Premier David Eby unveiled a plan to toll American commercial trucks traveling through the province to Alaska. The announcement sent shockwaves through the transportation industry, as it marked a significant shift in how cross-border trade routes could be managed in response to international disputes. This wasn't just about raising money, it was a direct response to rising trade tensions with the United States. The move was designed to send a message that British Columbia and by extension Canada would not be passive in the face of economic threats. The proposal, enabled by the Economic Stabilization, Tariff Response Act, was a warning. If the US imposed harsh tariffs on Canada, BC would hit back. The legislation was crafted to give the province flexibility, allowing it to respond quickly to any escalation in trade hostilities. The law didn't activate tolls immediately, but kept them ready as leverage, set to expire in May 2027. This approach gave BC a powerful bargaining chip, while also reassuring local businesses that the measure was temporary and strategic. The Alaska Highway, a vital link between the lower 48 and Alaska, became the focus. This route is not just a road, it's a lifeline for communities and industries that depend on reliable access to goods and services. For decades, American trucks have used this route freely, moving everything from groceries to industrial equipment. The uninterrupted flow of goods has been essential for both American and Canadian communities along the corridor. BC's plan targeted this supply chain with surgical precision, sending a clear message to Washington: disrupt our trade, and we'll disrupt yours. The province was careful to focus on commercial traffic, minimizing impact on ordinary travelers and tourism. The move made international headlines, highlighting the fragility of North American trade in an era of protectionism. Analysts and business leaders around the world watched closely, aware that the outcome could set a precedent for future disputes. Premier Eby framed the tolls as a defense of Canadian jobs and sovereignty, not just a financial tactic. He emphasized that protecting local industries and workers was at the heart of the government's response. The tolls became a symbol of a new, more assertive Canadian stance, turning a remote highway into the front line of a major trade dispute. The quiet wilderness of northern BC suddenly found itself at the center of international attention. The legislation's temporary nature showed this was a strategic tool, not a permanent fixture. It was a calculated move, designed to be lifted as soon as tensions eased or a fair agreement was reached. By focusing on the Alaska route, BC aimed to maximize pressure with minimal collateral damage. The government's careful targeting helped avoid unnecessary hardship for Canadian citizens and businesses. The message was unmistakable: Canada would not stand by if threatened. The province's bold stance rallied support from across the country, uniting Canadians in defense of their economic interests. The plan's precision and timing made it impossible for US policymakers to ignore. It forced Washington to reconsider its approach, knowing that Canada was prepared to defend itself. In a single announcement, BC transformed a quiet highway into a powerful bargaining chip. The world saw how even remote regions could play a pivotal role in global trade negotiations. The world was watching to see who would blink first, as the standoff between two trading giants played out on the roads of British Columbia. The spark for British Columbia's bold move was President Trump's threat of a sweeping 25% tariff on Canadian goods, a move that sent shockwaves through the Canadian economy and political landscape. Though the actual implementation of the tariffs was delayed, the mere threat cast a long shadow, creating deep anxiety for Canadian businesses of all sizes, from small family-run shops to major exporters. Trump's response to BC's proposed toll plan was swift and uncompromising. He called it blatantly unfair, and immediately began plotting ways to retaliate against Canada. The US government insisted that American trucks must have free and unobstructed passage to Alaska, viewing any tolls as an unacceptable barrier to interstate commerce and a direct challenge to American interests. The dispute quickly escalated, growing far beyond the original issues of tariffs and tolls, and drawing in new players and new stakes. Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan entered the fray, threatening to waive the Passenger Vessel Services Act, a move that would allow cruise ships to bypass Canadian ports entirely, upending long-standing travel routes. Such a change would devastate BC's vital tourism industry, especially in cities like Vancouver and Victoria, where cruise ship traffic brings in millions of dollars and supports thousands of jobs each year. The tit-for-tat escalation quickly turned what began as a regional spat into a full-blown international showdown, with both countries' pride and economies on the line. What started as a tariff threat now threatened jobs, tourism, and billions in economic activity, putting entire communities at risk and raising fears of a prolonged trade war. Both sides dug in, each move prompting a countermove, as negotiations grew tense and the stakes continued to rise. The standoff was a stark reminder of how quickly trade disputes can spiral out of control, affecting not just politicians but everyday people on both sides of the border. The livelihoods of thousands now hung in the balance, as uncertainty gripped workers, business owners, and entire industries. The border was no longer just a line on a map, it had become a battleground in a high-stakes economic conflict. British Columbia wasn't acting alone. Prime Minister Trudeau's federal government pledged retaliatory tariffs if Trump's threats became reality. Ontario, led by Premier Doug Ford, announced a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., a major pressure point. Even Yukon joined in, halting purchases from American liquor companies and restricting U.S. firms from government contracts. These moves showed a united Canadian front, with provinces and territories rallying together. The message, an attack on one part of Canada, would be met by all. Leaders emphasized these were defensive, not punitive measures. The goal was to protect Canadian jobs and sovereignty, not to harm ordinary Americans. Canada's response was coordinated, multi-layered, and resolute. The country's leverage extended beyond highways. Energy and procurement were now on the table. The trade war had become a national cause. Anxiety among residents. For many, the headlines felt personal. This wasn't just another policy debate, but a direct threat to their way of life. The Alaska Highway is more than just a road. It's a lifeline for the state, connecting remote communities to the rest of the U.S. and ensuring the steady flow of goods, services, and people. Governor Mike Dunleavy called for urgent federal action to resolve the dispute, warning that delays could have serious consequences for Alaskans. Alaskans feared becoming collateral damage in a fight they didn't start, worried that their voices would be drowned out by larger political interests far from home. Truckers warned that tolls would drive up costs, especially for perishable goods and critical supplies that can't afford delays or extra expenses. The Alaska Trucking Association predicted supply chain disruptions and price hikes, emphasizing that even small changes could ripple across the state's fragile economy. While most cargo arrives by sea, trucks are essential for speed and flexibility, especially for fresh food, medical supplies, and emergency shipments that can't wait for the next boat. Tolls threaten to slow this vital channel, raising costs for families and businesses, and risking empty shelves in stores across the state. The crisis felt different, created by distant political decisions, not by Alaska's geography or weather, but by choices made thousands of miles away. Alaskans urged their leaders to find a solution and keep the highway open and affordable, rallying together in town halls and through grassroots campaigns. The state's unique challenges, vast distances, harsh weather, and isolation, made the stakes even higher for every resident. The message from Alaska was clear: don't let politics choke our lifeline. The future of the last frontier depends on it. The tolls would ripple through Alaska's economy, raising prices on everyday goods. Trucking companies would pass costs down the supply chain, making groceries and essentials more expensive for families. The impact would be felt most in remote communities, where food costs are already high. Construction materials, car parts, and electronics would also see price hikes. Alaska's industries, oil, gas, mining, depend on fast, reliable trucking for critical equipment. Delays or higher costs could lead to shutdowns and job losses. The uncertainty alone would chill investment and business expansion. Small businesses might delay growth, and construction bids could become less competitive. The economic ripple effect would be severe, all triggered by a political standoff. For Alaskans, the tolls weren't just a policy, they threatened their way of life. The stakes were personal, not just political. The trade fight soon threatened BC's cruise ship industry. Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan proposed waiving the Passenger Vessel Services Act, letting cruise ships skip Canadian ports. Nearly all major cruise ships are foreign-flagged and must stop in Canada en route to Alaska. Waiving the law would devastate BC's tourism sector, which relies on millions of cruise passengers each year. Cities like Vancouver and Victoria depend on this seasonal influx for jobs and revenue. The threat was real. When the law was briefly waived during the pandemic, the economic hit was immediate. A permanent change would allow direct Seattle to Alaska cruises, bypassing Canada entirely. The move was a calculated U.S. response to BC's toll threat. The dispute now spanned land and sea, putting two vital industries at risk. The pressure on both governments to find a solution was mounting fast. Turning BC's toll threat into reality would be anything but simple. The Alaska Highway lacks modern toll infrastructure. Installing it would be costly and slow. Repurposing way stations could cause traffic jams and disrupt the supply chain. Legal obstacles loom large. International agreements from WTO may guarantee tariff-free passage for U.S. traffic. Any tolls would face fierce legal challenges, possibly dragging on for years. The complexity suggests the tolls are more a bargaining chip than a practical policy. The real power lies in the threat, not the toll booths. BC's move was designed to force negotiation, not collect cash. The chaos of implementation might be enough to bring the U.S. to the table. The dispute ignited strong emotions on both sides of the border. Many Canadians felt unfairly targeted by U.S. protectionism, fueling support for tough government action. In Yukon, citizens suggested even harsher measures, reflecting deep frustration. The conflict became personal, threatening to erode the goodwill that usually defines U.S.-Canada relations. Meanwhile, daily life along the border continued. Families and businesses still depended on open crossings. Leaders insisted their actions targeted U.S. policy, not people, but the lines blurred as the dispute dragged on. The risk, a temporary trade war, could cause lasting damage to cross-border ties. The real cost might be to the relationships that have long united the two countries. The stakes were about more than money, they were about trust. With both sides poised for economic pain, the only real solution is diplomacy. De-escalation would require the U.S. to back off its tariff threat, and Canada to shelve its retaliatory measures. A new fair dispute resolution process could prevent future crises. Quiet negotiations, possibly involving state and provincial leaders, might be more effective than public threats. Alaska and BC share a direct interest in keeping goods and people moving. Both countries are deeply intertwined. The U.S. needs Canadian roots and energy. Canada needs U.S. markets and tourism. The showdown is a reminder of that mutual dependence. The path forward is cooperation, not confrontation. Leaders must focus on shared interests to keep the world's longest undefended border peaceful. The future of U.S.-Canada relations depends on finding common ground, not drawing new lines.